Hello and welcome, Amazon sellers everywhere. Today we're in for a treat. We have with us two individuals who have spearheaded innovation that have greatly impacted the Amazon seller community. First of all, we have Adrian Rich from Seller Snap. And for anyone unfamiliar, Seller Snap offers a cutting-edge AI Amazon repricer. Learning from game theory, Seller Snap avoids price wars in order to maximize profits. And joining Adrian is Paul Rutherford from ScanPower. ScanPower is a comprehensive platform that streamlines the entire process of scouting, listing, and managing inventory for Amazon sellers. And ScanPower was born out of the challenges faced by sellers, and ScanPower aims to simplify tasks and boost profits. And so while both tools excel in their individual areas, there is crossover when they come together. And so today we'll be exploring that synergy. And my name is Ian Kaneshiro, and I will be the host / moderator of today's event. But we're going to kick it off by speaking to our panelists. So Adrian, we're going to start with you. Let's begin with Seller Snap. You know, the Amazon marketplace is intensely competitive. And so can you elaborate a little bit on the origin story of Seller Snap and how does Seller Snap, differentiate itself from other repricers in the market?
Yeah, for sure, Ian. And, firstly as well, just like to say, nice to be here having this sort of open dialogue. And I think we do a lot of work behind the scenes to create really cool technologies. And there's a lot of discussions that go into, how those technologies will work and collaborate together. And I think we'll get into a little bit about that later on. But just to get in a room with Paul and yourself, Ian, today and discuss some of these things is really exciting. I think Seller Snap came about out of a problem that was inflicting a lot of Amazon sellers. We are in the business of margins. Most businesses are. And so, we really started to look at, what can we do in order to make sure the sellers are optimized in the prices of their products online so that they can get the most out of every item that they sell and make sure that they're competing in a way that, we describe as collaborative, that is permitting sellers to win their fair share of the buy box, but do it at a price that doesn't really hurt their business. So when, push comes to shove, we're really, helping sellers improve their bottom lines. And I think that's where we, flourish as an organization and where we fit into the space.
That's fantastic. And I think that, coming from a solutions provider perspective, solving problems is the bottom line. And that comes from, experience and identifying those problems in the first place, which kind of brings us, to you, Paul, ScanPower. I know that, in the past when we've spoken, there's been talks of like the different problems that you've tried to solve. And so can you give us a little bit of insight into, how what is ScanPower, how it came to be, and the kinds of problems that you guys are tackling?
Yeah, thanks, Ian, and thanks for having me. It's really great to join this podcast, which I know is very popular. So I'm honored to be here. ScanPower began in late 2010 as a single user app that I developed with Chris Green to send books to FBA. And so it was an all-in-one, a one-touch solution to scan an ISBN, create an Amazon listing, convert it to FBA, print an F&SKU label, and place the item in a shipment. So it was a one-touch product listing, prep, and pack solution. And then in 2011, we evolved into a software service, so a multi-user, SaaS product. Back when, this was the early days of Amazon Web Services, so it was not quite as easy to build a full-stack multi-tenant software service. That you had to create a lot of these things on your own. Now, we're blessed with an amazing array of, software services like event queues and notifications and, relational databases that run in the cloud. So there's so many great technologies that we've picked up along the way as they've been made available. But in the early days, we were catering to booksellers. Then, once we dug into the Amazon APIs and realized that any UPC or ISBN that was scanned, for any product, we can surface that information to a seller. So we evolved and added a mobile app for sourcing, and this is kind of connected to why a repricer is so important, because in the early days, the price that you purchase the product at, that was your margin, and that margin would hold for a longer time than it does now. There weren't so many fees. There weren't storage fees in FBA. It was much simpler time, and repricers were existed, and ScanPower even had a really simple rules-based repricer after a few years, but those were the days that you could maintain your margins a little easier. So as I said, ScanPower has evolved into more of a FBA prep and ship solution. We still have a lot of sellers using our mobile and a web version of our mobile app for online sourcing. But we've optimized for, that original idea, which is, can we minimize the touches on product as it flows through the warehouse into shipments and inbound to FBA? And then can we track, meaningful data along the way? For example, costs, suppliers, some performance metrics. So we like to think of ourselves as an FBA prep and ship solution, but we certainly have a lot of people still using us for sourcing as well.
Yeah, I think that's really amazing. FBA, like as an FBA prep and ship solution, but some of the other tools that you provide. I think one of the things that you touched on, really briefly, is the connection into, Amazon Seller Central via the API that they provide to, to sellers, but also to third-party solutions such as ScanPower and Seller Snap. And I'm sure we're going to get into that a little bit. But I think that the path that is really interesting is about, data flow and getting the right data to the user at the right point. So, that Amazon seller can use that information in order to, make efficiencies on their workflow and answer important questions about their store. And so, both of the tools, Seller Snap and ScanPower, have, garnered really significant attention in the Amazon seller community. And so, could one of you or both of you walk us through a little bit of the journey about this integration between, Seller Snap and ScanPower? What was the conversation that was had? What was the driving vision behind this collaboration? And, how does it benefit those end users?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'll just start off by you sharing a little bit about how ScanPower became known to me and my role. And it was a couple of years ago. Myself and Ian, actually, we were at a conference in Orlando. It was a seller conference, and it was a very relaxed seller conference. We're talking beers by the pool floating around in tubes. And, we were there just on an anecdotal level, just to have conversations with customers and sellers and understand what they needed from solutions. And we just heard one thing over and over again, and that was ScanPower, 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 ScanPower from this entire community. And so we thought, okay, well, we better get in touch with Paul, who we knew to some regard already. But we realized that there was an opportunity to collaborate there. And I think, in the Amazon space, we talk about this a lot internally. You sort of look at solutions along a spectrum. So at one edge of the spectrum, you have all your tools that you use for procurement and fulfillment, etc. And then on the other side, you have tools that help you garner reviews from customers or do your shipping if you're FBM. And, Seller Snap works at a really small portion of the Amazon seller journey. Like right in the center there, we help you adjust prices. And so what we actually need in order to do our job is crucial information that we can garner or get from other third-party solutions. And so, once we started to hear this talking or this discourse around this technology that was being used by sellers, and we knew we needed specific data in terms of buy costs. Approaching, Paul and having this conversation about how we could kick this off and get some of that information, get cost information into our system to be able to generate, minimum and maximum prices as well as profit margins, needed to know how your business is performing. The nexus just made a lot of sense. And so I think that was a bit of the journey of how we got there. I don't know, Paul, if you had any other thoughts on what went on in your head while we were in the early days of coming up with this solution.
Yeah, that captures it really well, Adrian. And the only thing I would add is, um, in terms of the spectrum, early on when you create a software service, there's a tendency to think, to let the spectrum creep a little bit and to think, well, we could do that. That's,
Definitely.
we have their costs. We know what the fees and we know the fees for FBA, and we can build in some storage fees. We could probably do a repricer, and maybe if you're a very large company and you're well funded and you have a huge group of developers who can maintain a focus that kind of spans a large part of that spectrum, you can do some of these extra things. But a very humbling piece of my journey as a business owner is knowing that it's actually better for us to really stay in our lane and be more focused and more targeted about the features that we release in our niche, and then partner and find other companies like Seller Snap that we can work with. And it's a handoff, and we're not, we have no design over being an all-in-one app. And so many people, I think, have confused us for that, just because that's what sellers ultimately want. But I think, as we saw at the developer summit, there were interviews with sellers. I can't remember his name, but multiple sellers said, I know I'm not going to find an all-in-one solution. I'm looking for the best in class in each of the different niches, as Adrian said. And so when we started having discussions, I was getting lots of feedback from ScanPower sellers. We use Seller Snap. Please integrate with Seller Snap. And this, unfortunately, it took us a long time because we're not a huge company. So when we finally made the arrangements to start exploring the partnership, and then we got on the phone with Adrian and his team, it was immediately apparent to me that we were dealing with a really high functioning organization, not only with technical chops, but with the ability to manage these types of integrations efficiently. And so I was super excited. And I remember one of our conversations happened in the parking lot of a Starbucks, because I had to go visit my son in college, and my developers were in the Midwest and I was on the road, and Adrian and his team were, I think, also remote at that point. So the fact that we could work through the issues, work through the integration points, and get this in front of customers in less than 6 months was really exciting for me.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot there's a lot to unpack in that. And there's this idea of staying in your lane and understanding your niche. As you guys may or may not know, I host a podcast called Not Another Ecom Podcast, which is different from this webinar. But the one of the things that we often get into is that all the experts that come through and that we host on the podcast are always talking about hiring the right person or the right tool to do the right job at the right time. And so I think that this is this kind of marriage, so to speak, between Seller Snap and ScanPower is a perfect example of that. Two strong companies that are really established in the individual niches that have really stayed in their lane, but not because they can't expand, but because they're not going to. Because oftentimes what you see is, what the age old saying is, jack of all trades, master of none. And so you see a lot of companies trying to do a lot of different products and a lot of different tools, and they end up kind of going, taking that vision off of, taking their eye off the ball on these different topics. So I think that what Seller Snap and ScanPower has done is really special. And the second thing I'll just mention is that it's really great that Amazon has this idea of voice of the customer, but also so do solution providers, because that's ultimately where the dollars come from, and that's who pays the bills to allow companies to do what they do every day. And so being able to do that on such a short notice and is really cool. And so can one or both of you kind of talk us through a little bit about what does the integration do, and why might I as a seller be interested in that kind of integration?
So I'll go first, Adrian, and then hand off to you.
For sure.
ScanPower allows our sellers to capture the cost. If they have a purchase order that they're importing into ScanPower, or if they're just buying products in retail or online or wherever, they can input the cost at the point they buy it, and we're going to track when it was purchased, by whom, for how much, and what quantity. And we've always tried to do that at a very granular level, so it's good in the sense that every piece of information that they need to get the actual profit of an item when it sells is there. But it's challenging because you're always trying to match up what was bought with an order that comes through. In our case, it's always in a FIFO manner, but it's a little bit of a challenge when you're doing that at such a granular level. But if our sellers want to capture costs and eventually track COGS, we have the data. We just don't have the tools to use that effectively to make them more money. And so
that's where the
from our standpoint, the information that we're passing to Seller Snap is that bundle of, we call it a buy list, or what you bought, for how much, in what quantity, by whom, at what time. We're passing that to Seller Snap, and then they do all the hard work.
I think that's a perfect transition. So, once ScanPower has all of that cost data, and it goes through the internets and the World Wide Webs, so to speak, it goes to Seller Snap. And why is that information important, Adrian? And what does Seller Snap do with it from there?
Yeah, so I guess there's sort of like two parts to my response. The first one is, what we actually do with the data, and that is that, within our system we have a variety of tools that can help you, generate the profit margins you're looking to obtain, and a lot of that is based off your buy cost. We're looking at margins or ROI based on your buy cost, and so with that information, we'll automatically generate you a minimum price and a maximum price, which are required in our system in order for us to reprice. And then also, calculating your profit margins after the fact. You don't know how much money you've made unless you know how much money you spent in order to make the money. So it's kind of a really integral piece of data. But the second part of why it's important is because Seller Snap lives and dies by the data that we receive through the SP API. We are further down the journey than Paul and ScanPower, and so we're not privy to that type of information without the customer providing it to us. And we talk often internally about trying to improve the customer experience or the user journey, and having to pull data from a third-party system and then upload it into a system like ours. You might have to do it with a different syntax in a CSV import, or there might be a specific way that it needs to be done, and all of those are barriers to entry in the simplicity of being able to use systems. And so, if Seller Snap and ScanPower can just talk, then the customers don't have to do that extra bit of work to be able to get the full benefit of our system. And so we from a customer perspective, we see this as, well, on one side, an integration like this can improve how you use the system, but then time value of money, it can also prove how much money you're making because you're not spending as much time doing the work. And so those are, both considerations when we make decisions about, whether or not we want to go about a development. And specifically on this one, it sort of ticks all the boxes.
Yeah, I think that most definitely. Thank you for that answer. It's I think you're always talking about efficiencies and how to again hire the right people or the right tools for the job. And if you can take out, a 10-step process that happens multiple times a day at the end of the week, at the end of the month, at the end of the year, that adds up. And I think that's a perfect example of like why this integration might be useful. Adrian, I just want to backtrack a little bit. You had mentioned something that kind of pinged a note for me. You had mentioned the SP API. Can you unpack that a little bit? What is that, and is it important for a seller to know? Should everyone know about it?
Yeah, for sure. So for those that don't know, the SP API, the Selling Partner API, is where all third-party integrators, that is developers like ScanPower or Seller Snap, get their data from Amazon. So when you are a registered developer with Amazon, you get credentials that allow you to access their API. And then if a seller grants you permission, then you can access their data. And so, we're pulling and sending and retrieving and updating data all the time in order to do what we do as a repricer. And there's, millions of different technologies within the SP API in order to sort of do all of that. So, I think all solutions, all major solutions that the people use really rely on this technology in order to do their jobs.
And so, if I understand that correctly, because cost data isn't available through the SP API, that's where this integration like has so much value, is because
Yeah, exactly. I don't think there's a seller in the world that would be willing to give their cost data to Amazon. So, being able to share that privately between solutions is sort of the last piece of the puzzle in what we do as a solution provider. But, at the end of the day, like I said before, you need to know if your business is performing well. And you don't know that unless you know the cost of the goods that you sold. To know if you're profitable. So what they say in business, you live and die by your margins, and you have to know what your margins are. So that's what that sort of data sharing permits us to do.
thank you for that. Paul, do you have anything to add on that topic before we go to the next one?
No, I think that's a good overview. It's not something that most sellers need to worry about, but it's something that service providers, like Seller Snap and ScanPower, are constantly thinking about. We're participating in a beta for the next version of the FBA inbound API. Last year was a full sprint of upgrading all of our infrastructure to use the new Selling Partner API, which more or less was phased in. But for us, the nitty gritty hit right at Q4 when ours, we had to stop using the MWS API. And so there's a lot of, there's just a lot of stuff that goes on under the hood to provide services for sellers that it's not exciting to them. And sometimes it's not exciting to us, but we spend a lot of time thinking about the ways that we can take the options that, Amazon gives us and leverage that to add more value to sellers and to help them gain an advantage as a seller on the platform. And so we're constantly, and I'm guessing Adrian might speak some to this later and from the business repricing, but we're constantly looking at leveraging those APIs for our sellers to give them more value, to give them an advantage, and that's something that's consistent in our whole journey as an integrator.
Yeah, I love that. It seems like as an Amazon seller, you have like this giant puzzle, and you could be maybe it's 1,000 pieces, maybe it's 1,000,000 pieces, and then Amazon says, "We'll give you some of the pieces to the puzzle, but you got to read through all this documentation." Solution providers like you start to put these puzzle pieces together, and it starts to form a picture, but then there are holes, and so those holes and then are filled by the solution providers, making assumptions and calculations from that information. But then, you find that you have even more holes, and you gotta fill those gaps. So I think putting all those different options, and putting in that work, even though it's, as our friend Adrian, our friend Vanessa Hung, she says it's like the unsexy side of Amazon. This is very much the unsexy side, and it very much needs to be done.
Yeah, I just wanted to add there, Ian. I think that people don't necessarily look at developers or third party apps like ours in this way, but if you look at the iPhone, it's just this like very shiny box with a beautiful screen and a camera, but it doesn't do much. It doesn't do anything whatsoever, but it does once you start to add apps to it. And I think that when Steve Jobs first held up this thing on the stage and presented it, it was hard to conceptualize because you were like, well, okay, it's a phone, but you didn't realize that all the power came from these third-party developers that went and created amazing, useful utilities. And that was the real brilliance of the ecosystem. And because it's an ecosystem, you can scale really quickly with it, and you get third-party developers that make apps that are games or functional or educational or accessible, etc. And I think that's the method that Amazon is taking. They have this amazing thing, this marketplace, and there's so many people using this marketplace. Millions, billions of people all over the world use it, and hundreds of thousands, or if not millions, of sellers use it. But they just can't think through every single use case and develop for them. And so they're relying on third-party developers, small, everyone from small mom and dad businesses in garages building technology, all the way up to really large multinationals developing advertising technologies, and everyone in between to build those pieces of the puzzle to all those apps on the iPhone, but the apps on the marketplace. And I think that's sort of like where we fit as developers into the ecosystem.
I think that's an incredible analogy, because that Apple, the iPhone is just a box. Now it's a titanium box,
Yes.
but Amazon,
Very expensive titanium box.
It's a very expensive titanium box, and Amazon is probably is also a titanium box at this point, or a diamond box, whichever way you want to look at it. But these apps are what make the ecosystem. That's really great. Moving back in the little bit of time that we have left, I'd like to understand, with this rollout between Seller Snap and ScanPower, what kind of feedback have either of one of you received from any customers that are using this integration? Is it helpful, and is the integration helpful to the customer, but also is the feedback has there been any feedback that's been really helpful for either one of you in terms of improving the integration or either one of your products?
I guess I can start off with that one because we're the receiver of the data on this one. I think when we made the decision to go down this development, we knew we had shared customers. We weren't necessarily sure what the uptake would be on it because people have processes already. They're already getting this data across, but in a different way. And we had to make a few judgment calls. If you remember, Paul, we just sort of made a decision on which data we would take first, and how we would exclude, older scans and things like that. So they were risky decisions, and it took some time to get on, as part of product management, you get on calls and you discuss with your customers, is this how do you use the system? And you sort of sometimes hope that the way that you were intending to develop something matches the way that the customers use it. And I think we were really fortunate that a lot of the customers, our shared customers, used the technology the way that we had decided to develop it, that would be usable. We definitely didn't hit every customer, not everyone. I think one of the decisions we made was, if you created a new SKU for every scan, you could get the most out of the platform. And I think that's how a lot of the customers were using it. Every single scan in ScanPower translates to a new SKU in Amazon, which means that we get an identical cost for each product. And so I think we got some really positive feedback that this did save time, and it was a beneficial thing to go out and do.
Yeah, thank you for those insights, Adrian. Paul, do you have anything to add about how this integration might have worked for customers, or any feedback that you might have received?
Yeah, in preparation for this call, I reached out to some of the customers that we have that turned on the integration, and I just spoke with Sally and JR Struthers, who are using it in kind of a neat way. They are both RA and OA sellers, but they also have a wholesale business, and so they kind of use the full suite of Amazon tools. And uh, her feedback was that it was pretty much seamless. Like in ScanPower, it's a toggle button and a very short help article about how to enable the integration. And she said, kind of matching what Adrian mentioned earlier, that she turned on the integration. Repricing is not a big deal for her because she fully trusts Seller Snap. And so she goes into Seller Snap, she sets min and max prices, and then her buy costs are there, and she lets Seller Snap take over from there. So it's um, that's obviously a really great set of feedback, and I know we're interested in hearing other examples, even ones that don't go smoothly, so that we can optimize it and we can improve it. But that's an example of some feedback we've gotten, and I value it because I was curious how it was going to work for different types of sellers.
I love
Yeah,
that.
those.
Go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah, sorry. So I was just going to say, those were two customers I spoke with before we had released the tool. That I remember I actually messaged Ian and I was like, I just got off the phone with a couple of customers and I think we've hit a home run with this one because I knew at that point that it was going to work so seamlessly for at least a handful of our customers, shared customers.
And should every release of every tool always go like that? Where you hit the home run first try, no negative feedback. But I kid, it doesn't always happen like that. But I think that shows the thoughtfulness that goes to what might be no integration is simple, but they can be relatively straightforward as long as there's communications on both ends. You might Paul might you might call something a skew where Adrian calls it a listing, and that's just what it's
Mm-hmm.
called in the code, and you have to make sure that you kind of decipher those like those values. And so I think that if things went smooth, you guys did something right. um, and so kind of on a final note, as we near the end of this webinar, as leaders of the in the e-commerce solution space, where do you see the future of Amazon selling headed, or the future of Amazon solution providers? And are there any trends or shifts that you think sellers should prepare for?
Paul, you want to kick this one off?
Sure. So I'll frame my answer in less about the specifics of how sellers, what selling on the platform will look like in the near future, and more about how I think technology is going to drive different consumer and seller behavior. And I mainly think that it's automation that's going to drive so many new trends. I think we're going to see customers using AI assistants to find and purchase products on the marketplace. I think we're going to see integrators use automation to improve their processes and their efficiencies with restocking inventory to even prepping and packing inventory. I think we're going to see AI and robotics just get injected into all of those processes. And so um, I think that's I think that's going to be a challenge for most integrators. Um, but that's our job, is to to remove friction from sellers. And I think for sellers, it's going to be about choosing the right time to um, adopt those technologies, those automations, and recognize that um, what's happening on the customer side, and react to that just as they're also dynamically reacting to the changes in the selling side of the business. I'm personally excited about voice and voice commands being more integrated, throughout the app stack and app process. I think that has a lot of potential. But yeah, I think automation and AI is going to drive a lot of the trends that we'll see.
Yeah, I think that that's super insightful, and adopting those new trends as and those new technologies as they roll out can be a daunting task, as both of you know from that transition from the marketplace web service or MWS to the seller partner API. That's just a whole headache for technologies that are alive in the ecosystem. But leaning into it eventually gives better products, better experiences down the line. So, Adrian, I'll ask you the same question. Where is the future of Amazon selling headed, or what kind of trends or shifts do you anticipate?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's so much going on all the time, and I think that if there's one thing that sort of stood out to me recently, it's Amazon's did a really big push at Amazon Accelerate for a new technology they're offering. I forget its exact name, but it's sort of I think they call it global fulfillment, or global supply chain. And to me, that really stood out as a it's going to put a lot of pressure on sellers, because it sounds like they're going straight to manufacturers in foreign countries and going, how do we work with you to get your product straight from the manufacturing floor into our fulfillment networks? And so I think that where we're going to see significant growth is in places where those sort of countries that are really big on manufacturing aren't necessarily as big on the creative side in the development of products. So I think in the last couple of years, we've seen a return to a large portion of wholesale and retail arbitrage and wholesalers, and I think that we'll continue to shift sort of away from that type of stuff as you see a lot of sellers re-engaging in the private label sort of space as they try to maintain a grip on their market share by pulling away from the abilities of manufacturers to sell direct to consumers.
Yeah, I think that's a great pull from Amazon Accelerate from last year. Like you and I, Adrian, we talk about conferences like that at length, and like the different initiatives. And I think it's really interesting how Amazon is leveraging all these different. I don't want to call them micro businesses, because they're not micro businesses within Amazon, but like I guess on Amazon scale they are kind of micro businesses, but on anybody else's scale they're macro. But like the Amazon's FBA and logistics services, for example, is its own business, and they treat it like such. And but what they do is they leverage these different parts of their business, and for using the same analogy, put these pieces of the puzzle together in order to drive these new initiatives like this, like trying to scale, global logistics. So it is going to be super interesting and super exciting as they continue to move that forward.
And I could see that putting pressure on some of our customers. We serve a lot of 3PLs and prep centers.
Mm-hmm.
And with Amazon Global Supply Chain, they have a service called warehouse distribution, which is what some people use prep centers for currently, which is send the inventory there from the supplier and then feed it into Amazon FBA. Well, they're going to take a slice of that business from those 3PLs and warehouses. And so everyone's got to keep innovating to maintain, both the traction and the business. And also, we're going to have to adopt those new APIs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most definitely. That's I think that's a great way of looking at it. And, it's like it's both a positive and negative. Change is what drives innovation, and competition is what drives innovation. So as long as we can trust Amazon to keep pushing the envelope, which is going to mean that solutions providers from ScanPower to Seller Snap to third-party logistics providers are all going to either adapt or die. But yeah, so as we wrap up today's session, I just want to extend my gratitude to both you, Paul, and Adrian for your insights and sharing your expertise with us. And I wanted to thank anyone who's viewing this later on. Thank you for joining us. And just remember that in the evolving world of e-commerce, tools like Seller Snap and ScanPower are absolute game changers. And so I want to encourage you, if you have any further questions or need for additional resources, please reach out to the teams at either SellerSnap or ScanPower by visiting their respective websites to get a hold of the panelists and stay on top of the different things that are happening in the Amazon space. So until next time, I just want to encourage everyone to stay curious, and here's to your success in the Amazon marketplace. So Paul and Adrian, thanks again.
Thanks, Ian. All the best.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate your time. Good to see you, Adrian.
You too, Paul.
Take care.
Be well.
Bye.